Clearly a lot of change is happening in the world, and I think one reason it's important that we work together is that we can't address these changes on our own. I think one interesting fact from McKinsey is that since the Industrial Revolution, change is now happening 10 times faster, at 300 times the scale, and therefore about 3,000 times the impact. So the world is very different. And actually all of these trends are feeding off each other. And so we're in a different world, and we need to think together about a way forward.
Our whole sector is not prepared for megatrends. We're funded largely by bilateral grants, by aid. We projectize everything. That's been what we've done for the past, 7 decades or so, and we're still in that mode, and so we're not ready for change. So for me, there's a real sense of urgency. Now, 2 years ago, when I first started scanning the horizon, so to speak, with our colleagues and peer organizations, there was little to no appetite. That's changed. And I'm glad to see that there is what's the word I want to use? There is a drive for change, there is an appetite for change. Still to this very day, in 2015, about 95% of all aid goes to rural areas. So that's a big deal. So we are not tooled up, we're not equipped. That is the UN system, that's the NGO system, it's our donors. All of them are traditionally still geared and aligned towards rural development. So that's a big problem. Secondly, from civil society to civil corporation, if we look at many years ago, basically, and leading up to today, basically civil society believes we own the space where poor and vulnerable live. That's completely radically shifting to where public sector and private sector are finally beginning to recognize that the bottom 3 billion of the world's population is poor, actually are a viable market. And so the new entrants into our space are largely from private sector and public sector. For me, that's good news. That's real good news. It's about time. And so shifting from charity for aid to investing for good, where we'll see radical change and accelerating change towards the poor, that's what private sector and emerging governments will be able to achieve. And then, of course, lastly, from physical aid to digital aid, just take 5 years ago, Kenya started a small project called M-Pesa to basically try to help the economically poor, the unbankables, to become part of the economic market. Today, almost 80 countries, within 5 years, have started to adopt that same model. So mobile cash, digital solutions, digital aid will become the format for the sector in the future.
Lars, I think those insights are really interesting, and I think that all of us have been grappling with these mega trends. So we've been looking at the demographics, so the youth bulge in certain parts of the world, the aging populations in other parts of the world. We've been looking at how geopolitics is changing where power really sits, and the BRICS and the mints. I think one area that's fascinating at this time are the SDGs and how that's bringing around a different paradigm, bringing together the environment, bringing together the social aspects under a much clearer rights agenda, looking at inequality and being much more universal. So I think that's a big change for us. I think the one area that we're not looking at enough, and it's an implication of climate change, and it's an implication of increasing fragility and conflict of the number of people on the move in our world. So we still work within this nation-state idea, but actually many people are no longer within their own countries. And so this idea of people being much more borderless, and many more people being on the move, and on the move into what were traditionally the richer parts of the world, is a huge shift for us. And I think that's an area we need to really give some thought to and understand better, in terms of what it means for governments in the world and in terms of what it means for our sector and the work we do. I think that the fact that we've got a workshop on horizon scanning, the fact that we've got 20 people investing their time to come here, and the fact that we recognise together the issues we're facing, it is a really good first step. And my hope out of our time together is that we can, one, solidify what we understand as the biggest disruptors, that we can recognise the urgency that we face as organisations, and that we understand together that we have to collaborate our way out of this time, and not out of this time back to a normal. There is no normal to go back to, but how do we live in this ever-changing world, and how do we act, and how do we function, and how do we live out our missions as different organisations?
Over the past couple of years, there's been a lot of scanning, if you wish, on the what. So many organizations have done a fairly good job on scanning, what are the megatrends, what are the big issues. But where the huge gap is, and where I think this group can begin to play a big role or a significant role, is in the how. So we understand the what and we understand the why. But at the end of the day, how do we need to change as organizations and as an industry based on these megatrends? And I know that senior management are expecting a lot more help and a lot of more insights as to what precisely this means in terms of the